The room was full of laughter. Pink decorations, gift boxes stacked near the wall. My baby shower had just started. Friends were taking pictures. My husband was handing out drinks. Then my mother-in-law suddenly stood up. She lifted her glass. Everyone thought she was about to make a sweet speech about the baby. Instead, she said something that made the entire room fall silent. "Before we celebrate, there's something I need to ask." She turned and looked directly at me. Then she said the words that made my stomach drop. "Is this even my son's baby?" The room erupted into whispers. My husband looked completely confused. And just when things couldn't get more uncomfortable, the door opened, and my doctor walked in. "My name is Natalie Carter. I'm 31 years old and I live in Austin, Texas. Until that afternoon, I believed my biggest worry was preparing for motherhood, but one sentence from my mother-in-law turned my baby shower into something else entirely. Because that accusation didn't come out of nowhere. She had been building toward that moment for months, and she believed she had proof. What she didn't know was that my doctor was about to reveal something she never expected. My mother-in-law Linda had never liked me. Not openly, but in subtle ways. Little comments, little doubts. The kind of criticism that sounds polite, but carries a sharp edge. According to Linda, I wasn't the woman her son deserved. Too independent, too career-focused, too confident. Apparently, those were flaws in her eyes. When we announced the pregnancy, everyone else was thrilled. My husband Daniel nearly cried. My friends planned the baby shower immediately, but Linda's reaction was different. She forced a smile, then asked one quiet question. "Are you sure about the timeline?" At the time, I laughed it off. I assumed she was just being overly cautious. Now I understood she had been suspicious from the start. Over the following weeks, small rumors started appearing. Linda began asking strange questions during family dinners. When exactly did Natalie find out she was pregnant? How many weeks was she when she told us? She said these things casually, but the implication was always the same. She was trying to create doubt. Daniel never believed any of it. He trusted me completely. Every time his mother hinted at something suspicious, he shut the conversation down immediately. "Natalie is my wife," he would say. "That's the end of the discussion." But Linda wasn't satisfied. She wanted proof, and she thought she had found it. The baby shower itself looked perfect. Flowers, balloon arches, a dessert table covered in cupcakes, friends laughing and opening gifts. For the first hour, everything felt normal. Then Linda stood up and asked the question that shattered the mood. Guests stared at her in shock. My best friend nearly dropped the cake knife. My aunt whispered, "Did she really just say that?" Daniel looked stunned. "Mom, what are you talking about?" But Linda looked confident, almost proud, like she had finally exposed something. She crossed her arms. "The timeline doesn't make sense," she said loudly. "I did the math." The words echoed across the room. Several guests looked at me with concern, because suddenly the celebration had turned into an accusation, and Linda believed she had just revealed the truth. If you enjoy stories where the truth slowly unfolds and family drama takes unexpected turns, make sure you subscribe. And tell me in the comments, what would you do if someone accused you of something like this in front of an entire room? I read every single comment, because what happened next, no one in that room expected. Before I could even respond, the front door opened. Everyone turned toward the sound. A man stepped inside carrying a medical bag. My doctor, Dr. Marcus Hale. He looked around the room, confused by the silence. Then he asked a simple question. "Is everything okay here?" My mother-in-law's confidence suddenly disappeared because she didn't realize something important. Dr. Hale hadn't come by accident, and what he was about to say would leave her completely speechless. Dr. Marcus Hale stood in the doorway holding a small medical bag. He had been invited earlier in the week because he lived nearby and had delivered several babies for families in our neighborhood. But he clearly hadn't expected to walk into a silent room full of tense faces. He looked around carefully. Then his eyes landed on me. "Natalie," he said gently. "Everything okay?" Before I could answer, my mother-in-law stepped forward. Her voice was confident again. "Doctor, maybe you can clear something up." Linda crossed her arms and spoke loudly enough for everyone to hear. "I believe the pregnancy timeline doesn't add up." Several guests shifted uncomfortably. My husband immediately tried to stop her. "Mom, enough." But she continued anyway. "If this baby is truly my son's child, then the dates should match perfectly." Then she looked at Dr. Hale. "You're the doctor. You should know." The room waited, because suddenly the answer to her accusation depended on him. Dr. Hale looked genuinely puzzled. "I'm not sure what you're asking." Linda smiled tightly. "Simple," she said. "According to Natalie's due date, the baby was conceived before Daniel and she were even married." A few guests gasped. The accusation was no longer subtle, it was direct, and she believed she had proven her point. My husband stepped closer to his mother. "That doesn't mean anything," he said firmly. But Linda shook her head. "Oh, it does." Then she turned back to the doctor. "Explain the timeline." Her tone carried the confidence of someone who believed the evidence was already clear. But Dr. Hale simply adjusted his glasses and looked at me. "Well," he said calmly, "pregnancy timelines aren't as exact as people think." Several guests leaned forward. He continued speaking slowly. "Due dates are estimates based on averages. That means conception could happen days or even weeks earlier or later than expected." Linda's confident expression faltered slightly, because that wasn't the answer she expected. Dr. Hale continued explaining. "Every pregnancy develops at a slightly different pace. Ultrasound measurements give us estimates, not exact timestamps." He looked directly at Linda. "So using those dates to make accusations is not medically reliable." Several guests nodded quietly. Linda's certainty began fading, but she wasn't ready to back down yet. She shook her head. "That still doesn't explain everything." She pulled out her phone. "I counted the weeks myself." Some people in the room exchanged uncomfortable glances, because the moment was becoming awkward. Linda believed she had solved a mathematical mystery, but she didn't realize she had misunderstood something much bigger. If you're still here listening, thank you. Stories like this remind us how quickly assumptions can turn into accusations, especially when someone believes they understand something better than the experts. Tell me in the comments, have you ever seen someone accuse another person of something, only to discover they misunderstood the situation completely? I read every single comment, because what Dr. Hale revealed next made the entire room go silent again. Dr. Hale looked at Linda calmly. "Actually," he said, "there's another detail you should know." Everyone leaned forward again, because the doctor's tone had changed. He opened his bag and pulled out a small folder. "Natalie asked me earlier if I could bring her latest ultrasound report." Linda's expression tightened. "Why would she need that now?" The doctor smiled slightly. "You're about to see." He opened the folder slowly. Inside was the most recent ultrasound image. He placed it carefully on the table so everyone could see. Then he said something that immediately changed the mood of the room. "There isn't just one heartbeat." Guests blinked in confusion. Then realization spread across their faces. Dr. Hale looked directly at Linda. "Natalie isn't expecting one baby. She's expecting twins." Gasps filled the room. My husband's eyes widened in shock. Friends started laughing in surprise. But Linda stood frozen, because suddenly her entire accusation looked ridiculous, and the celebration she tried to ruin had just become twice as joyful. For a moment, the entire room stayed silent. Then the whispers started again. "Twins? Did he just say twins? My best friend clapped her hands in excitement. Daniel looked completely stunned. Wait, twins? He repeated. Dr. Hale nodded calmly. Yes. We confirmed it during the last ultrasound. The mood of the room shifted instantly. What had been tension a few minutes earlier suddenly turned into shock and excitement. But one person wasn't celebrating. My mother-in-law stood perfectly still. Her confident posture had disappeared. She looked at the ultrasound image on the table like it was something she couldn't quite understand. Then she tried to recover. Well, that still doesn't answer the question, she said stiffly. But her voice no longer carried the same authority, because now everyone in the room was looking at her differently. My husband stepped forward. Mom, he said quietly but firmly. That question was never appropriate in the first place. Several guests nodded. Daniel turned toward the doctor. Are the babies healthy? Dr. Hale smiled. Very healthy. Then he added something that made Daniel laugh. And very energetic already. The tension continued fading, except for Linda. My aunt stepped closer to the table. She looked at Linda carefully. You made a pretty serious accusation, she said. Linda opened her mouth, but no explanation came out, because the room had already shifted its support. Instead of doubting me, people were now questioning her. Dr. Hale spoke again. Just to clarify something, he said calmly, with twin pregnancies, due dates can appear even more confusing. Linda blinked. What do you mean? He pointed to the ultrasound report. Twin pregnancies often develop slightly differently in early stages. That means estimating the conception timeline becomes even less precise. In other words, her math had never been reliable. My best friend Emily leaned closer to me. She really planned this moment, she whispered. And suddenly I realized she was right. Linda hadn't just asked a random question. She had waited for a room full of people, for an audience. She wanted to embarrass me publicly, and now the plan had completely backfired. I finally stood up. The room went quiet again. Linda, I said calmly, if you had concerns, you could have asked me privately. She avoided my eyes. But instead, you chose my baby shower. A few guests murmured in agreement, because the setting made her accusation feel even more inappropriate. Dr. Hale closed the folder. Then he said something simple but powerful. I've been Natalie's doctor throughout this pregnancy, and there has never been any medical indication of uncertainty. He paused briefly. From a medical perspective, there was never a reason for that accusation. The room fell quiet again. If you're still here listening, thank you. Moments like this show how quickly a situation can turn when facts finally appear. Tell me in the comments. Do you think Linda truly believed her accusation, or was she trying to embarrass Natalie? I read every single comment, because what happened next made the room even more uncomfortable for her. My husband looked at his mother seriously. Mom, you owe Natalie an apology. Linda's face tightened. For a moment it seemed like she might argue again, but she could feel the room watching, everyone waiting to see what she would do. Instead of speaking, Linda slowly sat down. She didn't apologize. She didn't argue. She simply stayed quiet. And in that moment the silence said everything, because sometimes the strongest response to an accusation is letting the truth stand on its own. For a few seconds after Linda sat down, no one moved. The entire room felt awkward. Then my best friend Emily suddenly clapped her hands. Okay, she said brightly. We are not letting this ruin the baby shower. People laughed nervously. The music started again. Someone brought out the cake. Slowly, the celebration restarted. But the atmosphere had changed, because everyone in that room had witnessed what just happened. One by one, guests began coming over to me. My aunt hugged me first. Don't let that nonsense upset you, she said. Another friend brought me a plate of cake. Twins, she said with excitement. Soon the conversation shifted completely. Instead of whispers about accusations, people were talking about baby names. 2 cribs, 2 strollers, 2 tiny outfits. My husband still looked stunned. Twins, he repeated again, laughing. He hugged me tightly. I can't believe it. Dr. Hale smiled. You might want to start sleeping more now, he joked, because once those babies arrived, sleep would become a luxury. For the first time since Linda's comment, everyone in the room was smiling again. Across the room, Linda remained at her chair. She wasn't speaking to anyone. She wasn't participating in the celebration. For the first time since I met her, she looked uncertain, almost embarrassed, because her plan to create doubt had done the opposite. It had united the entire room against her accusation. Emily leaned toward me quietly. You know what this really was about, right? What? I asked. Control. She nodded toward Linda. Some people panic when they realize they're not the center of the family anymore. The comment stayed in my mind, because the more I thought about it, the more it made sense. Linda had always tried to control things. Family dinners, holiday traditions, even Daniel's career decisions. But now something big was happening that she couldn't control. A new generation, 2 babies, and a growing family where she wasn't making the rules. Later that afternoon, Daniel walked over to his mother. I could see them talking quietly near the gift table. At first, she crossed her arms defensively. Then Daniel spoke again. More firmly this time. Eventually, Linda looked down. For the first time that day, her posture softened slightly. If you're still here listening, thank you. Family stories like this remind us that sometimes accusations reveal more about the accuser than the person being accused. Tell me in the comments. Do you think Linda acted out of jealousy or fear of losing control in the family? I read every single comment, because the conversation Daniel had with his mother next changed their relationship forever. Daniel returned to my side a few minutes later. What did she say? I asked. He sighed. She admitted she was worried about losing her place in the family. That explanation sounded small compared to the chaos she created. But sometimes people act irrationally when they feel replaced. Daniel took my hand. I told her something important. What? That if she ever disrespects you like that again, she won't be welcome around our children. The words were calm, but they carried absolute certainty. And hearing them made me realize something. Daniel wasn't just defending me. He was protecting our future family. By the time the afternoon ended, the baby shower looked like a celebration again. Guests were laughing, friends were taking pictures. Someone had even started a guessing game for the twins' names. Linda eventually left quietly. But the party continued. Because despite everything that happened, 2 new lives were still on their way. By the end of the afternoon, the baby shower slowly began to wind down. Guests hugged me goodbye. Gift boxes were stacked near the wall. My best friend was already making jokes about needing 2 cribs instead of 1, but underneath all the laughter, I could still feel the weight of what had happened earlier. Because baby showers are supposed to be joyful, not confrontational, and yet somehow, mine had become both. Later that evening, once everyone had gone home, Daniel and I sat quietly on the couch. The house felt strangely calm after such a chaotic day. He looked at the ultrasound picture again. 2 tiny shapes. 2 tiny heartbeats. Twins, he said again, shaking his head with a smile. I laughed softly. Looks like we're going to be very busy parents. After a moment, Daniel sighed. I'm really sorry about what my mom said today. I shook my head gently. That wasn't your fault. But the truth was, the accusation had hurt. Not because I doubted myself, but because it came from someone who was supposed to be family. Daniel took my hand. I meant what I said earlier, he told me. If she ever treats you like that again, She won't be part of our children's lives. His voice wasn't angry, it was calm, certain. And hearing that promise meant more than any apology could, because building a family means protecting it too. The next morning, my phone buzzed with a message. It was from Linda. Just one sentence. I shouldn't have said what I said yesterday. It wasn't a long apology. It wasn't emotional. But it was the first time she had admitted she crossed a line. Sometimes, that's where change begins. Over the next few weeks, life moved forward. Doctor visits, nursery planning, friends dropping off baby clothes. The reality of raising twins started to feel both exciting and slightly terrifying. But one thing felt certain. Our little family was already stronger than the drama that tried to shake it. If you've listened to this entire story, thank you for being here. Family moments can be complicated, but sometimes the truth has a way of restoring balance when accusations try to destroy it. Tell me in the comments, what would you have done if someone accused you like that in front of an entire room? I read every single comment. About 2 weeks later, Linda asked if she could visit. Daniel and I talked about it carefully. Eventually, we agreed. When she arrived, she looked nervous. For the first time since I met her, she seemed unsure of herself. Linda sat quietly for a moment. Then she said something simple. I let my fears turn into accusations. She looked down at the ultrasound photo on the table. I don't want to start my relationship with my grandchildren like that. This time the apology felt real. Not perfect, but honest. Daniel nodded slowly. We're willing to move forward, he said. But respect has to come first. Linda agreed immediately. And in that moment, something important shifted. Not everything was magically perfect. But the foundation for a healthier relationship had started. Months later, when the twins were finally born, the hospital room was filled with happy tears. Friends, family, and yes, even Linda. She held one of the babies carefully and smiled, because despite the chaos of that baby shower, something beautiful had still been waiting at the end of the story. 2 tiny lives, and a family learning how to grow together.